you.
You have 2 minutes, Dan. Talk fast.
Your talk time's over.
You have as much time as you would like.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the commission and members of the general public. My name is Dan Jowdy. I've been the city treasurer here in Danbury for the past 5.5 years. The treasurer is an elected position, which again goes up on the voting machine every 2 years. He's the custodian of the funds of the city of Danbury, and he oversees the disbursement of city funds. No disbursement shall be made from any city funds of the city except by check signed by me, the treasurer, and shall be based upon a voucher or payroll duty audited and approved by the Director of Finance. Before I sign any checks on behalf of the city, I must be satisfied that the actual expense that has been incurred by the city has in fact been looked at, verified, and satisfied by me, as well as the Director of Finance, to be certain that it is the actual expense that has been incurred by somebody within the city. As I look at the position of treasurer, I deem the position of treasurer being elected as the representative to the taxpayers and the citizens of Danbury. I believe that the treasurer is an extra set of eyes and an extra set of hands that looks at the money that the city of Danbury takes in and the city of Danbury pays out. I believe I'm the representative of the people, and I believe that the presence of the treasurer at the table is good sense to have a representative of the people always in place. Having a treasurer permits another opportunity to look at city spending in an objective manner than those who incurred expenses or is requesting payment of a said voucher. As I mentioned before, the treasurer is the other set of eyes on behalf of the taxpayers. The treasurer oversees borrowing and he oversees bonding. If I could simply state what is the job of the treasurer, the treasurer ensures checks and balances on behalf of the taxpayers and the citizens. Eliminating a means of checks and balances within the governmental structure only means that we are permitting the weakening of the checks and balances systems for which the treasurer does. Bond rating agencies look at municipalities that have a treasurer or an elected official in place because they basically feel that a treasurer who's been elected by the people allows the people through the treasurer to have a voice in the process of bonding and debt service. Maintaining a treasurer is a source of reassurance to the taxpayer that they are represented in the day-to-day fiscal matters and spending of the city. That someone is there for them and providing assurance that the checks and balances of government are being maintained. I'm open to any questions about the position of treasurer.
Okay. Questions? If I could ask one, what did you think of the bonding where the council just issued five $500,000 bonds?
I, as treasurer, have to follow the lead of what was voted upon by the Common Council. The Common Council voted in favor of doing the 5 bonds, and as treasurer I have to see to it that the monies that they're requesting gets dispersed. Personally, again, I just want to say that I believe that at some point in time there may be the necessity to put a cap on bonding before it goes to a referendum, because obviously we do want to be certain that all the taxpayers have equal say. The unfortunate thing about any of the bond issues that we have in the city of Danbury is, sadly to say, that even the amount of money that we sometimes bond only a few percentage of the taxpayers actually come out. And that is the unfortunate thing, to wait the duration of having a bond election and then basically not having the turnout come out. Unfortunately, it's always the case that after the bond has been issued, people will definitely call and question why we spent the money we did, and basically the question has to be put back to them: did you come out to vote?
As treasurer, would you go before the council and recommend against bonding if it was getting too high, or is that beyond the purview of the treasurer's office?
That is certainly beyond the purview of the treasurer's office, because basically there's the city budget that the common council votes upon, and that they basically present to the treasurer to be certain that those funds that they have allocated get paid.
And currently with the city system, is every check a paper check?
Well, no. At the present time, the way the system is set up, the vendor expenses are paid by paper check. Now, what we are doing to simplify some of the disbursement of city expenses is we are encouraging the employees of the city of Danbury to participate in direct deposit, so that we're eliminating the need for paper checks every 2 weeks as they're being paid. And many people certainly like the idea of direct deposit, simply because they wake up in the morning and they find that on Thursday morning their paycheck has already been deposited. We're seeing more and more of the paper checks, especially in the payroll, become less. However, there's been no change with the vendors. One thing that I basically do each and every day coming in the City Hall is that the actual bill that's incurred by the City of Danbury goes to the department head. It is signed after he or she reviews it to authorize that it is paid. It then goes to the Director of Finance, who then looks at it. It goes to one of the individuals within the Department of Finance to be certain that that particular type of expense is in fact an expense related to the job description of that particular department, and that once all three have designated that this expense is in fact one that's permitted, then I will then sign the voucher with my signature. The voucher is placed through the scanner and a check is generated.
Okay. Is it the same basic system if they're buying soap for cleaning the floors for the city buildings?
Any expense that the city of Danbury incurs, whether it's a box of cookies that one of the school teachers bought for one of the graduating classes, or the dozen cups of ice cream last week, the voucher eventually comes across my desk and I review it after the other three people before me have reviewed it, and then I'll sign it. I have definitely, because I am accountable to the taxpayers, because I'm an elected official, I have challenged some of the expenses along the way. I have sent vouchers back. I have sent a request to explain the expense. And I will not sign the authorization for the payment until I, in fact, or any treasurer should, in fact, be satisfied that the expense that has been incurred was, in fact, legitimate. Now, I'm not saying that they're not illegitimate. I'm saying that, for instance, I can go back to an example just several months ago where there are 16 people from the city of Danbury who attended a seminar out of town. And across my desk was 16 requests for travel. And I basically said to myself, all 16 took separate cars. I want to look into this because maybe somebody carpooled. I don't know. maybe they thought because they traveled from point A to point B, even though they were in somebody else's car, they felt they were entitled to the travel pay. So, of course, I clarified it with the group, discovered that, yes, there was some misconception, and, again, took care of the payment according to those that obviously were entitled to payment. But those are the things that come across that, certainly I do put a red flag up. I look at some of the expenses that are occurred in the city, and I go over to the purchasing director, and I'll ask him if there's any way that the city, in fact, in purchasing certain things, we can buy certain things at a lesser price. I'll go down to the tax collector, and I'll ask him how the tax collections are coming in. And I have worked with the tax collector to try to work out new ways of getting rapid payment of taxes, such as the use of credit cards, and so on and so forth.
Question. This goes to what Dan, you were saying. I'm sure payroll, you don't look at each, you don't have to approve each authorization.
Well, what?
Because that's direct deposit.
Well, basically, with the payroll, now we have a payroll clerk within the finance department, and she, every 2 weeks, goes over each check, and the payroll comes down to me, and I have to sign off on the payroll just as the director of finance. And yes, I do look at the checks.
My main question really is with vendor review.
Yes.
Just on a month-to-month basis, can you give us some sense of...
From a month-to-month and in a year,
many,
in a year I look at about 35,000 vendor slips.
Okay, but on a monthly basis, how could you...
On a monthly basis, I can tell you that I can possibly look at, on a particular night, depending upon what time of the month it is, when the Board of Education may be submitting many of their vouchers, along with other departments. I may be in the finance office signing vouchers for several hours. And so basically, like the other night, they called me and they said, bring your sleeping bag because you have about 30 inches of paper to sign tonight.
Are you able to say in terms of quantitatively how many authorizations you're reviewing?
I would say that on a monthly basis,
yeah.
I would tell you that I'm probably looking at anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000 invoices.
That's kind of what I expected to hear you say.
Mm-hmm.
And how many hours a week do you allocate to this position?
The allocation, it varies, and I can tell you that I may be in here every day, twice a day, and I may come in here for a couple hours each time I'm in here. Not necessarily signing vouchers, but we do have concerned constituents that come into the finance department or the treasurer's department asking questions. And basically, the treasurer sometimes wears a second hat, and he may be considered the ombudsman of the operation because they come to me with the questions and I go to the source for the answer and I give them back the answer that hopefully they want to hear, and sometimes it isn't the answer they want to hear. And so when that happens, I usually ask the department head to come into the treasurer's office to sit down with the constituent to go over the matter that they have a concern about.
Do you have staff in your office, or?
Well, basically, my position is incorporated in the finance department. And of course, the finance department, we have a staff of 16 people. And I, of course, am the only one in the finance department or under the umbrella of finance that is elected. And so basically, being elected, I feel that I'm the representative of the taxpayers and the citizens when I go into the finance department, because I represent all the citizens of the city of Danbury, all those that pay taxes, to be certain that, if I could use the term, that we're all getting the best bang for our buck.
I have 3 questions that I'd like to ask you. We asked them in reverse order. You just mentioned you review expenditures for the school board or the school system. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
As you're looking at that, do you look at any synergy that could occur between the city and the school, and do you make recommendations along those ways?
You have to understand the structure in which the school board is funded. Basically, what happens is the Common Council approves the budget of the city of Danbury, and they approve in the piece of pie the amount of money in which they're going to give the school board to operate with.
Right.
Unfortunately, there is really nothing as far as checks and balances are concerned here at City Hall to ensure that the money that the Board of Education is in fact using for whatever. Because at the present time, as you may be aware of, that when the Board of Education receives their funding, that they basically take the bundle of money and they allocate it as they see it to be allocated. However, there's, certain areas that we as the finance department, the treasurer, the director of finance, may have certain concerns about the expenses of the Board of Education. We can only make a recommendation. We can only ask a question. We do not have the carte blanche authority. However, again, any expenses that come into the City Hall from the Board of Education still needs the signature of the Director of Finance and the Treasurer. So obviously, yes, there is a way in which, we can put up a red flag and say we're not content with this, but unfortunately, we don't have the ability to go in and pry into the expenses.
What I was thinking about in the check and balance system, as you see opportunities for synergy in either purchasing supplies or things like that, and you seem to be in a perfect position to spot those kind of activities. And in being an elected official, as opposed to a director of finance who is not elected, is your recommendations carry more weight in that regard?
What I've done is I have spoken with the purchasing director, and I have asked him if there's any areas in which he and the director of finance of the Danbury Public School System can possibly look at anything and be able to collectively buy and get a better price for the city of Danbury. They've worked out certain things. However, the school board is pretty independent of the city of Danbury as far as operations are concerned. And as far as we're concerned, they're doing a great job up there, and certain things we do try to look at and say, can we do something with this?
So this is a value-added
Yes, it is.
benefit of the position. The other thing is you mentioned signatures. Is your signature appear on all the checks?
Every check in the city of Danbury.
It's by a stamp then, right?
It is by a stamp, but the check cannot be generated until my signature's on the actual voucher
On the
that goes
voucher,
through
right.
the scanner.
Okay, who controls the stamp?
The actual stamp is in the Director of Finance's office. It's under lock and key. The machine itself has coding, and basically what happens there is that machine cannot process a check unless they see my signature going through on the voucher. Can they put a voucher through twice? No.
Okay, that's what I was going to get
The
at.
machine is
So
very
there's
capable of rejecting a second check.
Okay, so it is accounted. You get a beginning count and end count. So, and
Absolutely.
that's
Every day I see the beginning check, and I see the ending check, and I see the amount of money that the city has in fact spent for the day.
Last question pertains to city indebtedness. If I am correct, I believe if you look at the restrictions that the city must follow, or the statute the city must follow, there is an item in the charter at which we've all discussed about the bonding and what should be interpreted as a cap or whatever. But if you look beyond this, if you look at total city indebtedness, is there any policy other than the state statutes that limits the city or triggers something that says you can only bond up to a certain dollar amount. I'm not talking about projects emanating from the capital project that goes through the Common Council. I'm talking about cumulative city indebtedness. For example, the state statute, I believe, Rick, is $947 million based on a formula of certain. There seems to be, we're, I think, currently at about 146, is that
Correct.
right? On total indebtedness. Do we have any safety margin that we don't get somebody in here in office that says, whoop-de-doo, let's go and bond a lot of stuff? Is there any restrictions in that?
It would be the restrictions up to the concerned citizens, the concerned taxpayers, to make their voice known in a voting referendum on a bond issue. The built-in mechanism that I could see is that we're very fortunate right now. The city of Danbury has a AA rating for bonding. However, if we were in conditions of other municipalities, you would find that those lending institutions would not even entertain the idea of coming into the city of Danbury to promote a bond sale. Therefore, if you do not have somebody coming forward to do the bond sale and find you the money, you're going to find out that you're not going to be able to fund those projects because your credit rating is not such. Nobody's going to come in and loan you the money. You're a bad risk. But at the present time, we're very fortunate because of we have one of the highest bond ratings in the state of Connecticut. Now, do we have to look at the debt service up the road? Yes, we do. And that's what we're presently doing at the present time with the Director of Finance and the former Director of Finance. We're looking at where we'll be in years as far as paying back the debt.
But as I recall in the budget, Dan, there is a quote policy that's based on several benchmarks. Now, are you familiar with that?
I'm familiar with some of that. I do not basically not able to elaborate on the nuts and bolts of it because that basically is certainly reserved for the Director of Finance. But on a general broad scale, yes.
Who would monitor that? Would that be a function of the Treasurer's Department, or is that strictly within the purview of the Director of Finance?
Well, it is in the purview of the Director of Finance. However, it also behooves the Treasurer, who's accountable to the taxpayers, to be able to get the information that he needs so that he's able to transmit the information that a taxpayer would like to hear.
Okay. Then if one of these benchmarks are exceeded, what happens?
Well, if one of the benchmarks is exceeded, then obviously it would be the duty of the Treasurer to put up a red flag and say, ladies and gentlemen, we can't go any further. I mean, let's face it. I mean, take, for instance, a credit card. You get a credit card company that says, congratulations, your credit has now been extended to $20,000. All well and good, but you have to look at it this way. If I go out and I spend the $20,000, can I pay it back? Same thing with running the city of Danbury. We have to look at the picture. If we're going to create debt service, are the citizens going to be able to pay it back in future years? And obviously, we do have to look at whether or not we can. And we'd make the determination.
Thank you.
You're just changing the focus to custodian of funds. Your signature is then on every account of the city of Danbury?
Correct.
And no monies would ever be dispersed without your signature?
No monies would be dispersed without my signature. However, in the absence of the Treasurer, the town clerk has the right to disperse city funds only upon the consent and permission of the Director of Finance.
Mr. Jowdy, are you saying that each bill that comes to the city goes to the department head, it's reviewed, and then sent to the Department of Finance?
Yes.
And either someone at the staff or the Director of Finance reviews it?
Yes. How the Finance Department is pretty well broken apart is each individual or several individuals are assigned certain accounts. The accounts that begin A through B and so on and so forth. And some of our major accounts, only certain people are authorized to handle them because of the size of the accounts. So what happens is, and let me just tell you how, let's go with the utility bill from the Danbury High School. The meter reader goes up to Danbury High School, runs the scan, and prints out the bill when it goes back to the CLMP or Northeast Utilities. They in turn send that bill to the Beaver Brook location for the school board. The Director of Finance of the school board will look at the bill. He will authorize it to be paid. Now it comes to City Hall.
Hold on a second. On what basis does he authorize it? He reviews it for?
He reviews the expense of the utility bill at the high school.
Right.
And he is the Director of Finance for the school system, Elio Longo.
So what is he saying when he sends that along?
He sends it along and he states that this can be paid, should be. And they look at the bill, they do a comparative analysis of the usage, and they in turn will then okay the bill, delete that amount of money because we have a running balance with the school board here at City Hall, delete it out of their budget, and then it goes to the Director of Finance,
Right.
our Director of Finance for the City of Danbury. He reviews it.
And what's he reviewing it for?
For, again, the expense, to be sure that, we're not wasting our energies. If he feels that the usage at a particular location is twice the amount of energy being used there that would be used at another building, he's going to say, why is this building that is X number of square feet incurring this kind of a utility expense versus a similar building that we have in the city that's only spending 2/3 of this money. So he's going to raise a flag, and we're going to find out why. And then basically, once he gets an explanation, then he'll send it over to me and authorize me to sign off on it to be paid. However, again, there's question for me. I'll call the Director of Public Buildings and say, you've got any reason to explain to me why this particular bill is as high. But every bill, no matter what bill it is in the city of Danbury, and as I say, even somebody in the school system or somewhere else in the public buildings goes down and buys a box of Dunkin' Donuts, and I'm gonna use Dunkin' Donuts because if you have guests coming in and you go out and you buy Dunkin' Donuts, the bill's going to come to me, and I'm going to be certain that it was for hosting a meeting or a conference with guests. But I'm not going to authorize the payment of Dunkin' Donuts because you decided on Friday morning we're all going to have coffee and donuts.
But the Dunkin' Donuts bill or the bill for travel that you gave, that example, all those, and I'll call them bills for lack
Yes,
of a
go
better
ahead.
word, goes to the department head,
Correct.
who sits and says, okay, I have 16 people going, and some are carpooling, some are, it got by him, and then it went to the Department of Finance, and somebody there reviewed it, and then it went to the director. You're saying each one of those people just passed on this idea that they didn't understand that maybe travel meant only the actual car expense, let's put it that way. That it got through all that, I mean, you're talking about at least 4 different people reviewing this before it even gets to your eyes.
Yes, and the reason why they okayed it is because they had the answer that I didn't have.
The only other question I have is, you indicated that the city's bond rating will suffer if we didn't have a city treasurer. Is that your position?
I'm not saying the bond rating will suffer. I'm saying that bond rating companies and businesses that finance bond sales prefer to work with municipalities that have a representative at the table that's there representing the electorate versus a bond company coming in here and speaking with you, the mayor, and Peter Bezade as the director of finance, and the two of you are saying to me, we want to put out X number of dollars, because basically what they're saying is, okay, I'll work with you, but I don't know exactly whether or not the general population is behind this.
So it's your position that the bond rating won't suffer with or without a treasurer?
No, the bond rating will not suffer as long as we're able to pay back our debt service. What we find is that bond companies are more inclined to go to municipalities that have an independent elected official at the table versus administrative people.
I got you.
Because you look at the treasurer is the elected person in finance. The director of finance is the appointed person in finance. So you have an appointed person by the administration, and then you have another representative at the table who is in fact the representative of the taxpayers.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Dan, one quick question. And are you bonded?
Yes.
Okay. And who else in the city of Danbury is bonded?
Anyone in the city of Danbury that in fact handles money.
Okay. Thank you.
Questions? Anybody?
Thank you for your breeze.
Jody, thank you very much. You did a great job.
Thank you. Appreciate the time, everyone.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. I noticed that it is late, and we have a few things on this agenda. So we'll take a quick break, or you want to plow through?
Plow through.
The next thing on the agenda is a discussion on combining planning and zoning. Do we want that discussion, or would you like to table that? Because if you look at our agenda, discussion on planning and zoning, discussion on the length of term and term limitations for several offices, and the final thing was Mr. Gottschalk was going to talk to us about the possibility of petitioning for a special act regarding recall of city elected officials. And that would, so number 6 would impact number 5.
That's correct.
So shall we go to Mr. Gottschalk next?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would concur in
Anyone
that.
think that makes sense?
I was going to offer a suggestion that we're not going to deal with number 5 tonight, right?
I'm thinking we're not going to come to a conclusion tonight on number 5. Is that the sense of the commission?
I believe you have some information concerning number 5 and people who might attend this. The mayors? Didn't you
Oh,
want
I'm
to
sorry.
contact the mayors?
Yes. Yes.
So, shouldn't we hold that, I mean, we can have,
So table number 5.
right, table 5, we can have Rick speak to us about this stuff in
Yes.
preparation of it.
What
And
Mr.
the
King is...
planning and zoning, is it worthwhile, if everybody is up to it, to spend a few minutes talking about that?
I don't know, Bob, I think a lot of people are hot and a little tired, so,
So let's put planning and zoning on
It's up,
the...
you know, I have no,
Let's
I'll
put...
go with the flow.
Let's put planning and zoning on the next agenda.
fine.
Okay.
I mean, Mr. Secretary.
Well, lengths of terms, just so you know, I have contacted Mayor Boughton. He would like to come and address us, and I'm just waiting to work out details because we're thinking it might make sense to bring other former mayors in to speak to us, and that's going to take a little bit of coordination of schedules and things.
Right.
So we don't have a date for that yet. So that means we would table number 5 indefinitely. Do you want to discuss the treasurer's position and the city clerk's position at the next agenda, for the next agenda? Do you think you have enough information that we might come to some conclusions?
You know, my suggestion would be, if we're going to do that, we really shouldn't engage in a protracted dialogue with any guests at that particular meeting. or
It would be,
it's short.
well, that's what I'm thinking. If we did planning and zoning and city clerk and treasurer as discussion items and possibly action items, that should fill up a meeting.
Yes,
Is that what you're
yes.
alluding to? Let's make that the next meeting agenda, and hopefully I'll have dates then for the mayors at that point in time. Then we will skip ahead to number 6, which is the commission will discuss with its counsel, Mr. Gottschalk, the possibility of petitioning for a special act regarding recall of city elected officials.
Could I just interject one thing?
You already
Briefly.
interjected one.
Thanks, I know. The last meeting, we were given this report. Peter, I think I may have received it from you. This is that report for 2004? The task force report?
Yes.
Regarding?
Yes.
Did everybody get a copy of this?
I think everyone has a copy of this.
If you haven't, I would recommend you read that.
We will have to make copies.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
I can copy that too.
You know what, I have a copy of it. I'll scan it in and I'll email it to everybody.
Great. I look for that because it really is pertinent to the planning and zoning
Yes.
issue.
I think it's rather revealing of some of the issues that are occurring in the planning department and how they affect planning and zoning. It kind of helped guide me a little bit. I'm sorry, go ahead, Carla.
Would you like to address us?
Sure. Start, and I can be brief.
It will be much appreciated.
Yeah.
It's still raining, take your time.
Ready?
We love you.
Remember that municipalities are creatures of the state. We have no powers that are not granted to us by the state. But there's language, you know, lawyers wrote it, or people who weren't lawyers probably wrote it, that has a little play in the joints, and you can't really tell what it means. And so people before us engaged in charter revision and included language in their charter that have permitted recall of elected officials. What the court said was, you're creatures of the state. Those powers which have not been given to you by the state have been withheld by the state. This one wasn't given to you. You don't have it. The charter provision is void. That's where we are right now. And that led to a conversation about whether or not we could create this law. We know we can't do it by charter, so is there any other avenue? The other avenue is, well, there are two. One is to seek through our legislative delegation the passage of general law on the subject. That would solve the problem. The only other option is special legislation that deals just with Danbury, rather than general language about recall that would apply to all municipalities. And the question came up last time about what is the right of the city to seek the adoption of special legislation. And in fact, as Peter Bezade indicated last time, our ability to do that is restricted. And really, with a couple of exceptions that don't apply here, it's restricted to cases where the general law doesn't fill in the gap already. So, yes, it could be done. I don't know whether the General Assembly would be receptive to it. Maybe not. But I know how you started. You started through the Common Council. The Common Council has to vote to make the request by a 2/3 vote, and then it has to go to Hartford prior to a session of the General Assembly and be considered by them. So there's nothing you can do, but yes, there is a mechanism. How successful it might be, it's anyone's guess. Is that 3 minutes?
Very good. Very good. Now, does everyone understand
Well, she didn't answer anything, but that's good.
All right, to put that in context, one of the issues, if we were to raise the length of terms to 4 years, many members of the commission have said, well, what would happen if we had a bad person in office and we wanted to recall them or impeach them? In effect, the short answer is, we can't do it under present statute. We can go to the Common Council and ask them to petition the state, and then the state's got to do a special act, and the fact is it doesn't look like we can do that. So when it comes time for the discussion on the length of terms, and we start to review that, one of the issues is it'll be very difficult to move people out. General question. Could the charter have language that says if someone is indicted for a felony or convicted of a felony that they must resign?
Hypothetically.
Yeah, I don't, right, you haven't been indicted yet.
I think that's the functional equivalent of a recall.
It is. So what you're saying is we couldn't put in language that...
There's no language in the general law that affords the municipality this right.
Okay.
But there is language in the charter, correct me if I'm wrong, that says if a mayor becomes incapacitated, and that could...
Inability to perform the
right,
duties of his office.
right, incapacitated, he can be replaced, not removed, but replaced by the president of the Common Council.
There
So
is
in
language.
effect, if we had a mayor, if in fact we, this is a question, if in fact we changed the terms to 4 years, and then we got a mayor that got into all kind of scandals and everything else, and that interfered with his ability to perform his duties as mayor, could the Common Council enact that provision of the charter and say he's incapacitated and the president of the Common Council take over until such issues is resolved?
Then you're open.
Well, you can imagine what would happen.
Of course.
It would depend on what decision the mayor at that time made. Maybe his view of the world is that in an electronic age, you can perform the duties of your office by email. Who knows what it'll say?
But who determines that, I guess is what I'm
A
asking.
judge will determine it.
Okay, so, but there is a way of separating the mayor from the office through the judicial system, even though it's not in general law.
What would happen?
Am I right, Peter?
I mean,
Isn't that
you separate him from the office by incarcerating him, but I mean, there is no mechanism that is clean and neat that he would be removed from office, such as impeachment, okay?
No, I'm not
All right,
talking about
or recall. We don't have that.
No.
Those are clean and neat, where
Right.
where you don't rely on a different branch of government to take care of something. If the problem would be if you have a mayor who's under investigation and then he's indicted, but he's out. He's not in jail. He's waiting trial. I mean, he comes to the office every day. You'd be torturing the word incapacitated to do something about that.
How did Waterbury handle this issue with their mayor?
He was in office,
Yeah.
and they
But-
waited for him to resign.
Is that what it was?
Yes.
He resigned from office?
Okay, I don't want to have any more of a discussion. We needed that point for the next discussion.
You can imagine the dynamic. It's going to be a very fluid situation with the president of the Common Council, who is responsible by charter to perform the absence or disability of the mayor, who may or may not attempt to assume the responsibilities or the duties of the mayor. The mayor's office, the mayor himself would have, a range of choices.
Oh, it would be messy.
You can imagine what it would be
Of
like.
course, it'd be messy.
Yeah.
But I'm saying
Yeah.
there is something
I
there.
think that the point is the one that Peter made, which is there's no clear path that tells us in advance exactly what would happen in the event of the indictment of a mayor.
Okay. So, that leaves us with, assuming that we are going to table the discussion of the clerk and the treasurer, table the discussion on planning and zoning, table the discussion on lengths of terms. This is all going to come up at the next meeting, so we don't have to torture other people being here. We will then put those on the next meeting agenda, if everyone's okay with that. Then we will add to that agenda, we have a couple of handouts. Mr. King went back through and came up with a list of all of our topics to be resolved. So I would ask that you take a look at this, and we will discuss this at the next meeting, if that's okay.
If you have any changes to that, if you can just email me. If there's something you want to add to it or something that should be deleted from it. This is the thing that Carlo asked me to prepare.
And what that is, these are the things we've started to look at, and there may be some other things that we want to add, because we're looking to the end of this thing.
Thank you, Bob.
And then, sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then, did you hand this out to everybody? Okay. We also have a copy of a draft preamble. That will be on the agenda for the next meeting also.
Thank you. And the next meeting is July 14th? Am I reading that right?
Yes, I think that is the correct date.
Yep.
Any other questions? Anything that needs to be brought before this
you get a
fine
copy of this?
commission?
Did you guys get copies of this?
Yes.
Preamble?
Thank you.
I think I drafted it.
Oh,
Oh, no. Where did this come from?
Mary.
Mary Comstock.
Extras, Mr. Chairman?
Perfect. I'll keep an extra one, just because can't have enough
feeling will
preambles.
not be hurt very much.
We will endeavor to have the room chilled a little bit. Anything else anyone would like to bring before the commission?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn, please.
Well done, Joan. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, let's go on for a few.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all. This was just above and beyond the call.